In southern Ukraine, a Russian armored column pressed forward, operating as if their avenue of advance was completely uncontested. Within minutes, that same advance disintegrated into a chaotic kill zone of heavy fire, panic, and total tactical collapse. What you and I must realize is that this devastating interdiction did not begin when the lead vehicle exploded. The trap was sprung long before, well before the hostile crew realized they had entered a highly engineered kill box. This goes far beyond standard armored tactics, infantry maneuvers, or a failed breakthrough attempt on one isolated frontline sector. It is a grim demonstration of how modern electronic warfare and coordination can shatter a combat force before they can react, transforming their own forward movement into a lethal bottleneck. The deeper tactical reality is that this hostile environment does not end at the forward line of contact. It targets command elements, communications, and the critical decisions holding an entire offensive operation together. Stay locked in as we report, because the objective truth is not just how this Russian push was neutralized, but what this engagement exposes about the brutal new reality of modern combat. The Russian unit advanced into southern Ukraine as if their path was completely uncontested, totally unaware that the topography had been weaponized against them long before the opening salvo was fired. The advancing formation was not just some disorganized group of military vehicles. It was a heavily mechanized assault formation designated as elite. They pushed deep into a restrictive corridor where advance was only possible by sticking to one narrow strip of asphalt. This tactical constraint is vital, as the surrounding shoulders were far too soft to support heavy tracked armor. Modern armor can withstand heavy kinetic strikes, but unfavorable terrain will immobilize a tank faster than hostile fire. Faced with these severe geographical restrictions, the Russian column took the standard tactical option. They committed to a single file line, linking the velocity, maneuverability, and ultimate survival of every single vehicle to the platform directly ahead of them. That tactical bottleneck was their undoing. In mechanized doctrine, a unit loses its combat effectiveness the second it cannot disperse, maneuver laterally, or scatter under incoming fire. While that armor looks imposing on satellite reconnaissance, in reality, its combat structure becomes totally rigid. Once that formation is compressed into a single line, you and I can see how the advantage shifts to the defender who has already calculated how to break it. Our intelligence indicates Ukrainian planners did exactly that. This narrow corridor was never treated as just another transit route. It was mapped as a tactical fire control problem, using active drone reconnaissance, passive signal intelligence, and terrain modeling to measure the precise width of the asphalt, the saturated mud on the shoulders, and the natural choke points where heavy tracks would lose momentum. This level of battlefield preparation weaponizes the terrain. The highway ceases to be an offensive vector and becomes a channel of total physical control. The defending forces waiting in ambush do not need to guess where the hostile armor will deploy, because geography has already funneled them into a highly predictable avenue of approach. This crucial phase dictated the outcome. The decisive tactical advantage did not originate from the artillery batteries. It was not even initiated by the anti-tank guided missile teams. It began with surveillance. The defenders calculated exactly where the Russian vehicles would traverse, their estimated rate of march, and where the restrictive topography would compress their lines. This intelligence yielded an asset far more lethal than simple tactical surprise. It provided perfect timing, and in a pre-registered kill zone, precision timing beats raw, uncoordinated firepower. An armored convoy under power retains tactical options, but as it decelerates within a narrow corridor, those options vanish. The lead crews might believe they are still making progress. Command elements in the rear assume they can still adapt the maneuver. Yet once the entire unit is pinned by mud, weight, and tight interval limits, even a heavy assault force relies on one highly vulnerable variable. 0 failures can occur at the point. That is a fatal vulnerability when entering combat, particularly when your opponent has built their entire defensive scheme around it. Consequently, before the lead Russian vehicle was engaged, the battle's outcome was decided by deep reconnaissance, operational patience, and mastery of the engagement area. Once the column was squeezed into the precise formation the defenders required, one heavy hit was enough to turn their advance into a catastrophic, flaming bottleneck. The tactical trap sprung as a Ukrainian anti-tank team engaged the lead platform right at the sector where the column was already losing speed. And that single precision hit instantly neutralized their entire line of advance. The opening strike did far more than disable a single armored vehicle. It completely shattered the tactical movement of the entire enemy assault. If we analyze the imagery, the lead tank took a hit at the absolute worst spot. It was totally exposed at the front, with no safe bypass route. With that lead vehicle burning, the entire column lost all forward momentum. Rear crews were trapped, completely unable to maneuver around the smoking wreckage on this narrow route. They had no room to turn. They could not deploy into the adjacent fields. The surrounding terrain was too soft for heavy armor, turning this single road into a deadly choke point. That is exactly what made this situation so critical. An armored advance relies entirely on momentum, tactical spacing, and rapid command decisions. But when that lead vehicle became a burning roadblock, the entire column ceased to be an active threat and became a sitting line of easy targets. At that exact moment, armor and firepower meant nothing compared to raw tactical positioning. The Russian advance was paralyzed. On a modern battlefield, losing your momentum means losing your life. That is why a single precise strike up front caused catastrophic failure for the entire unit. Taking out that lead vehicle created what was, in practical terms, a massive armored gridlock under active fire. Behind it, multi-million-dollar vehicles were stacked along a single narrow road, all blocked and utterly exposed to incoming strikes. This level of congestion is lethal. It strips away tactical choices faster than officers can react. Any driver attempting to reverse risks smashing straight into the armored vehicle behind them. A tank trying to spin around will slide off and bog down. If a driver steers off the pavement, they trap the entire heavy platform in deep mud. So, before the next shells even hit, the enemy was already trapped in a formation they could not reorganize. The offensive was not just halted. Its operational momentum was completely shattered. Command and control breaks down in these moments, as panic at the front of the line rapidly cascades all the way to the rear. An aggressive spearhead force was suddenly transformed into a line of sitting ducks waiting for the next blow. And that devastating second wave hit almost instantly. The moment the column froze, Ukrainian artillery unleashed targeted barrages along the road. It was clear these coordinates were pre-planned long before the battle began. This rapid response tells us the entire zone had already been scouted, mapped, and programmed into artillery batteries before the Russian tanks even rolled out. Without needing slow, revealing adjustment shots, Ukrainian guns blanketed the trapped column with immediate, devastating impacts. The enemy had zero time to react. Artillery shells raining down on a packed road destroy more than just steel. They paralyze command. Officers must make decisions amidst heavy concussions, blinding smoke, screaming radios, and absolutely zero room to move. Trapped in that bottleneck, executing a simple order becomes a near impossible task. Even veteran soldiers descend into absolute panic when the road is detonating, and every vehicle around them is a magnet for high explosives. Yet, the most brutal phase of this engagement was not the destruction of those armored vehicles. The real slaughter began when Russian infantry abandoned their hatches and fled on foot to survive. The troops reacted exactly as trained under intense indirect fire, but the instant they dismounted, they walked straight into a secondary trap designed specifically to exploit their survival instincts. With heavy shells landing directly on the road, staying inside those steel coffins was suicide. Armored personnel carriers can shield troops from shrapnel only for so long. But when precise, heavy barrages rain down on that exact narrow path, those metal hulls feel more like giant targets than actual shelter. So, the soldiers scrambled out, sprinting for ditches, nearby tree lines, and any dead space off the road. It was a basic survival instinct. Under intense bombardment, you desperately seek any depression or obstacle to shield you from shrapnel. But our intelligence shows those escape paths were far from random. They were pre-plotted coordinates on the Ukrainian tactical map. The very spots that looked like safe cover had already been registered as secondary target zones. That is the brutal reality of this trap. Make no mistake, those soldiers were running directly into another kill zone. Intel confirms hostile forces pushed deeper into the kill zone. This wasn't just a road ambush anymore. Our tracking shows it's escalated into a drone-led hunt. Ukrainian surveillance birds are keeping eyes on target, tracking hostile movements even through the thick smoke of direct kinetic impacts. Thermal feeds, constant aerial tracking, and pre-mapped kill boxes ensure fleeing hostiles find no safe haven in this theater. Dispersing actually makes them easier to isolate than when they were bunched up on the main road. Scattered infantry splits into vulnerable fire teams, meaning each isolated pocket is systematically pinned and neutralized. Crucially, once hostile troops scatter in panic, their field commanders completely lose the ability to regroup their units. An armored breakthrough relies not just on heavy armor hitting the objective, but on dismounts maintaining cohesion under fire. Right now, that cohesion is completely shattered. Hostile forces are losing far more than just tanks. They are losing the actual combat manpower required to sustain the push. While the ground operation crumbles, a deadly threat is actively dismantling the column from the skies. Armed attack drones are swarming the area, targeting main battle tanks, command assets, and any active radio signatures. This multiplies the tactical pressure. The primary threat remains kinetic. Our loitering munitions strike thin top armor, exploiting structural weak points where heavy plating cannot protect them. The secondary threat is informational. These strikes are blinding the enemy by systematically severing command and control lines. This electronic warfare and drone phase is decisive. An armored crew dodging heavy artillery is highly vulnerable, but a mobile command post trying to re-establish comms faces extreme danger, forced to transmit while their entire perimeter is collapsing. Yet, every attempt to regroup creates fatal signatures. Infantry firing at overhead drones expose their positions with muzzle flashes. Any command unit boosting radio transmission strength instantly lights up our electronic warfare sensors. Consequently, every desperate attempt to coordinate simply guides in the next precise Ukrainian strike. This completely redefines hostile resistance. The threat is no longer just incoming kinetic fire. The real peril is that any defensive action instantly exposes a brand new target. Consequently, the hostile convoy is losing key assets, suffering severe communication blackouts, and descending into absolute chaos. We are degrading this force not just with raw firepower, but through a system targeting their movement, transmission, and defensive fire. At this point in the operation, it is no longer just about one pinned column on a dirt road. Intel indicates the enemy's entire rescue and support echelon is now being dragged into this same meat grinder. Their rescue operation is not just failing on the forward line of contact, because even their rear artillery batteries are being quickly integrated into the Ukrainian kill web. As the ambush escalated, hostile artillery units attempted to respond with emergency suppressive fire. They targeted suspected defensive positions to disrupt our assault and buy their trapped armor time to reorganize. On paper, this is standard tactical doctrine. When armor is pinned on a tight axis, support batteries must suppress the threat, relieve pressure, and get the column moving again. However, that move carries massive risk. The second those hostile batteries open fire, they compromise their coordinates. Our counter-battery radar tracks incoming shells mid-flight, instantly calculates the origin point, and directs heavy return fire before gun crews can reposition. This means their desperate attempt to salvage the assault immediately paints a bullseye on their own artillery. Those hostile gun crews are not stepping into a standard firefight. They are entering a highly lethal grid where Ukrainian forces are waiting to detect, measure, and immediately eliminate any active signal. This shows the true scale of the ambush. Ukrainian defense forces aren't just trapping the main spearhead on a single road. We are actively neutralizing the entire fire support network backing them up. This is rapidly expanding the combat zone and accelerating chaos. If the forward line stalls but rear artillery remains functional, a unit can regroup. But that option is gone. If our counter-battery fire suppresses their rear artillery the second they fire back, the enemy's entire sector grinds to a halt. Their commanders freeze, gunners hesitate, troop movements stall, and the overall operational tempo plummets. This isn't just about wrecked armor. Every unit in the Russian system now fears that a single radio transmission or movement will draw immediate lethal fire. That is precisely how a local tactical defeat triggers widespread operational drag. The frontline assault loses all momentum, while their rear support echelons lose total confidence. But this tactical logic didn't vanish once that specific ambush ended. 4 months later, We saw it return when Ukrainian precision strikes targeted a major Russian command post deep behind the front lines. This time, the target wasn't the physical mass of an armored column. It was the central nervous system guiding the force. The doctrine remained identical. Locate the exact point where the enemy is forced to concentrate their assets. Then hold fire until that concentration becomes their fatal weakness. Battlefield intelligence confirms Ukrainian surveillance didn't rush the attack. They waited patiently, monitoring the target. They tracked electronic emissions, staff vehicles transporting high-value targets, and command assets, noting a massive spike in radio traffic. These signatures distinguish a routine supply dump from a high-value command node. The distinction is vital. You can easily rebuild a shattered logistics depot, but decapitating a command post blinds entire regiments instantly. Our data suggests the strike was executed in a highly coordinated, layered sequence. First, they severed power grids. Next, communications went dark. Finally, kinetic strikes leveled the hardened bunker. This wasn't just to neutralize senior leadership or level physical structures. They aimed to collapse their situational awareness. Without power, battle maps go black. Without tactical comms, combat orders freeze in place. Without a secure command post, decision-making completely fractures. Frontline battalions might still have combat troops, armor, and ammunition, but they hesitate because orders from command are delayed, chaotic, or non-existent. In modern warfare, that split-second hesitation is a decisive factor. You don't always need to physically annihilate an army to render it completely combat ineffective. Sometimes, you only need to disrupt their timing, shatter their coordination, and destroy their confidence in the chain of command. When we analyze these two precision strikes side by side, one crushing an armored column, the other neutralizing a rear command post, the broader strategic picture comes into sharp focus. The core takeaway from this operations report is clear. In modern conflict, whoever dominates the information space will destroy their opponent far quicker than any force relying solely on raw numbers. Ukrainian forces didn't secure this victory simply through superior accuracy. Their success stemmed from mapping Russian doctrine before the engagement even began, anticipating where the armored column would rout, identifying choke points, pinpointing electromagnetic emissions, and predicting exactly where troops would seek cover, and modeling their immediate reaction to the opening strike. That transformed a single attack into relentless, cascading pressure. The opening barrage wasn't an isolated event. It triggered a devastating sequence where every hostile defensive maneuver exposed a fresh target. This is the core tactical reality we must understand. Modern victory requires shattering the enemy's decision-making loop until their response time is neutralized. Once paralyzed, the target force is always one step behind. The moment they maneuver, our sensors have already logged them. When they attempt to conceal their positions, those coordinates are already flagged. Before officers can re-establish command, the next precision strike hits. On the modern battlefield, speed means far more than physical mobility. It demands converting actionable intelligence into lethal strikes before the enemy can react, fundamentally shifting the utility of legacy combat power. Heavy armor, infantry squads, and artillery batteries remain essential. But when every single maneuver is tracked and electronic signature recorded, concentrated formations become massive targets. Combat mass is still critical, but only if it can deploy without prematurely exposing its position. If tactical camouflage fails, sheer volume transforms from a major asset into a liability. Survival on today's front lines dictates that forces remain strictly hidden, electronically silent, and highly unpredictable. Ultimately, this tactical lesson extends far beyond a single ambush. We are seeing a war where sensors, electronic warfare, drones, rockets, and heavy artillery no longer operate in isolation. They now fuse into a single, seamless kill chain, and that is what makes this lethal. A single localized clash can now paralyze entire sectors, forcing the enemy to completely overhaul how they move, command, and shield their forces. That is why this recent ambush is critical. It demonstrates the brutal new doctrine of modern conflict. The hard truth of modern combat is simple. Victory belongs to whoever detects first, decides faster, and strikes before the enemy recovers. From that choked corridor where the Russian armor lay trapped, to the command post decimated by targeted kinetic strikes, severing their power, communications, and coordination, the entire operational sequence reveals a highly coordinated pattern. This engagement was not decided by raw firepower alone. Information dominance drove the outcome. Sure, heavy armor, elite troops, and sheer numbers will always hold value on the battlefield. But conventional assets cannot protect your troops when the enemy holds absolute supremacy in surveillance, precision targeting data, and the electromagnetic spectrum. The second you lose that edge, even battle-hardened units begin to disintegrate much faster than expected. So, the critical takeaway here is not just a few burning tanks or a crippled command post. The real lesson is that modern warfare allows us to execute synchronized strikes on both the body and brain of the enemy. When that occurs, total systemic collapse begins long before the enemy even realizes they are defeated. This is the unforgiving new doctrine taking shape in modern combat. If this tactical brief was valuable, subscribe to Military Force for direct intel on weapons, battlefield evolution, and the strategic logic driving modern conflict.